Okay. So not a whole lot to report today because it was more of a it's Shabbat here, so it was more of a relaxed day. We went to Shabbat services at Beit Daniel. Um, as you are well aware, our synagogue is affiliated with the Reform and Conservative movements. This trip, I've been doing stuff pretty much exclusively with the Reform movement because the trip is run through. Well, it's not run through the Reform movement, but it was organized by a Reform synagogue for rabbis who are ordained through the first through the well who are whose official affiliation is through the Reform movement, which is my union. In the past, I have done a trip for conservative rabbis actually, and there was that trip was uh, much more focused on the conservative movement. So it was nice to experience the reform movement. So Beit Daniel is like the main reform synagogue here in Tel Aviv. A lot of pretty well-known people go there, and it's a pretty amazing place. So we went to services there. It was the same place we went to services last night. This morning, no rockets, so that was good. And let me see. I think there's somebody in the waiting room. Um, uh, Rabbi Gilad Kariv was there and gave the Devar Torah today. Rabbi Kariv is a very interesting figure. Not only was he the head of the Reform movement, or as it's called here, the Israeli Movement for Progressive Judaism, here for a number of years, but he also was a political figure involved in the Labor Party. And I don't believe he's in Knesset anymore, but he kept getting so close to being elected to Knesset. And then in the last government with Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid as the prime ministers, he actually got elected as a member of Knesset, and so that was really exciting to have a Reform rabbi um, be elected as a member of Knesset. And he gave the Devar Torah, and he talked about one of the communities that was unfortunately had one of the worst massacres on October 7th was the community of Be'eri on the border with Gaza, and that was where the gentleman was from who we met with, who had lost his leg and whose wife and son were murdered. Was Barry, and ironically, Rabbi Karif pointed out that in this week's Torah portion, we read for the first time about Be'eri, that Esau, one of his wives' names was Be'eri. And Be'eri literally means like my well. And he talked about how this Torah portion also talks a good bit about Isaac. And what's interesting is that of all of our patriarchs, um, uh, Isaac is the only one who is born and dies in the land of Israel and never leaves the land of Israel and in his life. Abraham was born outside of the land of Israel, and Jacob leaves the land of Israel when he is, it wasn't called that yet, but he leaves the land of Israel, one to find a wife for himself, and then also when he's working to be able to marry Rachel. He's outside the land of Israel, and then he also leaves the land of Israel to connect with Joseph, and dies in, I believe it dies outside the land of Israel. So Jacob, but Isaac stays within the borders of the land of Israel the whole time. And so in this parsha where we read about Be'eri, we're also reading about the importance of being in the land of Israel, and we read throughout um, that the Israel that Jacob and others and Isaac built wells throughout the land to be able to sustain it and nourish it. So interesting Devar Torah that I enjoyed. Let's pull up my notes really quickly. Um, Following our Shabbat services, we uh, gave we met with some leaders of progressive Judaism and the IRAC, which is the Israel Religious Actions Committee here in Israel, and they talked about how, perhaps this war represents some hope. That I talked a bit yesterday after my meeting with the LGBTQ community um, about how the spouses and partners of LGBTQ individuals had not been entitled to benefits if their loved one was killed in war. And after this very heroic tale of this guy, Sagi Golan, who was killed running towards Hamas as a reservist on October 7th, 6 days before he was supposed to get married, the government changed the law, and even the ultra orthodox parties voted in favor of changing this law. So that was really incredible, and there's some people who have pessimism that it's going to go um, uh, there are people who have pessimism, but there's also people who have tremendous optimism that today is basically like September 12th was for us back in 2001, where we have a country here that's more united, that Haredim are volunteering like they never have before for the army, that Christian Arabs are volunteering for the army, that Muslim Arabs who are citizens of Israel feel more connected to Israel than they have in the past, and that same sex couples are being given more benefits now, and people are seeing the efforts of same sex, the efforts of the LGBTQ community and validating them, and also that reform rabbis are in the reform movement is really stepping up to help people at this time, going from community to community and seeing what resources they can get for them, what they need, and how they can provide counseling for them and support for them. And so there's tremendous hope that maybe through this horrible thing, it's not going to fix all of our problems, and there will be division again. But right now, people are starting to validate each other in a way they hadn't been in Israel. Um, but uh, anyhow, um, what we were talking about too, where we were hearing some frustration from the Israeli rabbis, was with particularly the reform movement and in America, and and liberal Jews in America, um, in that reform in that there are often this was kind of why this trip came to light. In case you missed it, this trip came into being. We had planned this trip before the war began, and it was a response to how in 2021 a group of rabbinical students, um, largely reform rabbinical students, but also conservative rabbinical students and Reconstructionist rabbinical students, dozens of rabbinical students wrote an open letter where they talked about the suffering of the Palestinians and condemning Israel's war in 2021 without a single mention of Hamas's rockets and all the Israelis living in bomb shelters. And we have this horrible crisis right now in progressive Judaism. It's frankly good for my job security, but it's horrible for them for progressive Judaism, which is that fewer and fewer people are choosing to become rabbis. And we don't know why that is. I don't know why it is, but fewer and fewer people are choosing to become rabbis, and there's a greater demand for rabbis than there. The demand outweighs the supply, and as a result, the rabbinical institutions are struggling tremendously financially, to the point that after over 100 years, 50 years, Hebrew Union College is closing the rabbinical program on their Cincinnati campus and is only keeping the LA and New York and Jerusalem campuses open. And so a consequence is that I think out of desperation for money, they are accepting students who I don't think should be accepted, to rabbinical school. And we're seeing, but you know what? People said that about me too. So we all have our opinions. But uh, I, we're seeing students who are anti-Zionist being admitted to the school and becoming rabbis. And I'm not being critical of Israel. I can be critical of Israel, as you all know, but who are like fundamentally against the state of Israel. And what these rabbis here in Israel were talking about is when progressive rabbis and progressive Jews are really anti Israel, that hurts them here, because the narrative that gets depicted in the media is that Reform Jews hate Israel. And they'll claim, oh, this Reform Jew did this, when the person might not even be Reform. If you hear like a Jew who is criticizing Israel, like, well, slamming Israel and creating anti Israel protests or supporting the BDS movement, they will say that this was a Reform Jew, even if it wasn't. And that doesn't mean we can't criticize Israel. They very much appreciated our outspokenness with with the judicial reform issue. They very much appreciated that. But an example that they gave, a couple examples that they gave too, would be were Facebook posts from colleagues of ours that were just uh, talking about Israel's genocide or ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians, or um, they talked about how the Union for Reform Judaism a few years ago had issued a public statement condemning Donald Trump's decision to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And the way that they saw it, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, because I see both sides to this. As Americans, we should make our voices heard when it comes to American foreign policy issues. But the way that they saw it, and they're right too, as Israeli reform rabbis, is here we are trying to grow this movement in Israel, and the media showed all this stuff of the largest movement of Judaism in the world that claims 2 million members as part of their synagogues, is releasing a statement saying that they condemn Donald Trump's move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, when something like 90% of Israeli Jews supported this. Even the left wings, a lot of the folks on the left wing supported this. And they say that then reflects poorly on us, because Donald Trump's going to do it anyways. He's not going to say, oh, the reform movement doesn't want me to do it, so I won't. And he's not going to say, and Netanyahu isn't going to say, I just got a red alert on my phone that there was a town with a rocket fire, but so I'm going to kind of keep my eye and ear out to see if anything comes my way. But anyways, but they Netanyahu's not going to change his position because of what the reform movement says. And likewise, the reform movement just issued a statement calling for humanitarian ceasefires in Gaza, and they say, "Gosh, when the reform movement does that, it hurts us here. It hurts because everybody then hears that the way they hear it is that Reform Jews are against the war effort, or are against the government, or against the army, even though that's not the case. So it's something for us to think about. And another thing we talked about with that was how really Israel is the only place in the world where you can be a a left wing Zionist and not have to be apologetic for being a Zionist. In every other country in the world, including the United States, within liberal circles, you have to, it's taboo often to be a Zionist or uh, something that you are going to be debating. So that's, and to the degree, as I pointed out, that I'm not trying to make a statement here of who should and shouldn't be president, but Rashida Tlaib, the Palestinian American congresswoman from Michigan, Michigan, a swing state that is um, extremely has a huge Arab population, um, said that um, because of Joe Biden's support for Israel during this war, she's calling on her followers to punish Biden in 2024 and not vote for him. And so it's fascinating because you're seeing some liberals, far left wing folks, uh, who Israelis are calling woke Qaeda, um, for their support of bin Laden now, are actually saying, you know what, because of Biden's support for Israel, we're willing to get Trump reelected. So to punish him and teach him and the Democratic Party a lesson for that. And then the thing I've been hearing from Israelis too, I actually feel really safe here, to be honest. Hopefully that will stay the same for the next couple of days. But I've been hearing just overwhelming gratitude from Israelis for me being here, what it means to them that we came, and also, um, hearing from Israelis that uh, they are scared for us. They're hearing about anti-Semitism growing in the diaspora and in America and on our college campuses. And they are deeply, deeply concerned for us. And they feel like that just as it's our duty to stand with Israel, is their duty to stand with us. And they are really scared for us. And they're saying, with what just happened and there being a war and everything, they say, thank God that we live in Israel and not the United States or not Europe, because we'd be really scared if we were. I didn't get any sirens today, but there was at like the Lod, which is where the airport is, and Ramla, kind of that area. There were some sirens and rockets, and so uh, I didn't. I didn't have to go to the shelter. Didn't hear any sirens, but I did hear the Iron Dome. I heard the booms of the Iron Dome from those towns that are not too far away from Tel Aviv. But God willing, no sirens today. Still none. Kind of looking out toward Gaza right now, keeping my eyes and ears open. But yeah, so that was it for today. Like I said, kind of a bit more low key of a day. We did a text study with rabbinical students from the Israeli program for Hebrew College, and tomorrow we're going to be going to Jerusalem and meeting with some organizations in Jerusalem, and and doing some text study in Jerusalem, and then coming back here tomorrow evening. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, you can see on my Facebook Live, we ended the day by was a giant rally in support of the hostages here in Tel Aviv tonight, and we led a Havdalah service with families who we led a Havdalah service with families uh, who have members, families who have family members who are currently being held hostage. So we had a Havdalah service with them, and then there was a rally afterwards. Wearing my shirt from the rally, which says "Return them home now," and also everybody in Israel right now You see like almost everybody wearing these dog tags that say our hearts are held captive in Gaza. Bring them home now. And you can order some of this stuff and support the causes of this organization, which is trying to keep the hostages on the forefront of the minds of the Israeli public, pressure the government to do what they can for the hostages, and also is sending family members of hostages around the world to tell their stories and bring international attention to it. And you can go to bringthemhomenow.net and order stuff like this if you would like. So anyhow, that's about it from here today. A bit shorter today. But did y'all have any questions or comments for me? Let me see. I see that Matthew wrote in the comments. Rabbi, thank you for sharing all this. Daily briefings are a mechaya. Thank you. Please do convey in response that even as we will aim to do more to support Israel, our biggest challenge is Israel's sharp right turn politically since Netanyahu took over in 2009. That is the real reason for the rise in anti-Zionism among young Jews. Yeah, and I'm sure they would agree with that. And Dale, good to see you. If you make your way to Tel Aviv in the next couple of days, I'd love to see you. But don't worry if you can't. Stay safe. I heard that last night Spot got some rockets.
Rabbi, I'd love to ask if there was at the rally today, on the Promise podcast this week, they were talking about how the families of the kidnapped are, coming out against the government and criticizing the government. And there was recently a negotiation that apparently Netanyahu rejected to trade a certain number of hostages for, a 5-day ceasefire or something. And I don't even know how I feel about all
that. I don't know if he rejected it or if I don't know the details. I know what they were trying to negotiate was the release of 50 hostages for a 3-day ceasefire.
So did that come up in the protest tonight, and how did people seem to feel?
I didn't hear anybody talk about that specifically, but other than Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas in Gaza, I think Bibi Netanyahu is the most hated man in Israel right now. There are so many signs everywhere of Bibi blaming Netanyahu and pictures of Netanyahu with a bloody handprint on his face that says, our blood is on your hands, and blaming Netanyahu for this. And the yeah, so I saw a sign that had Netanyahu, a sticker that had Netanyahu's face on it, and a broken apart Israeli flag, and it said on it, "Bibi, the destroyer of Israel." Everyone I've talked to, and now keep in mind I am in Tel Aviv, so I'd be curious what people in Jerusalem, which is more conservative, would say. But everyone I've talked to has said he's done. He can't survive this. And the debate is whether we finish this war and then get him out, or whether we kick him out now. So it's mid-war. So we'll see what happens. I mean, he's in a lot of trouble. He is in a lot of trouble right now. He politically, the judicial reform was extremely unpopular, and even a lot of folks who supported him opposed the judicial reform and the way that was handled. He he is being largely blamed for the complete failure of what occurred in on October 7th. Him and his government, 70% of the army at that time was 70% of the army at that time was in the West Bank guarding a settler party for Sukkot that was seen as largely provocative and wasn't there to protect the southern border. And Netanyahu allowed money to come in to fund Hamas because he thought that would be good as a counterbalance to the Palestinian Authority. And the general consensus too is that he ignored. They knew Hamas was preparing for this stuff, but he didn't think they'd actually be able to pull it off, for one, and two, he was more focused on he was let me close all my apps so my phone stays alive longer. He was more focused on getting a peace deal with Saudi Arabia, and also the judicial reform and keeping himself out of jail than he was on this threat. And so what I've heard over and over and over again is he can't survive this. But we'll see. I've thought that in the past and been surprised, but this is what people are saying is that with the judicial reform, Israelis were more divided than they had ever been before. And Netanyahu, the whole thing he had always run on was security. And if you want a safe Israel, if you want a secure Israel, vote for me. And then this was the greatest failure in the history of the Israeli government. So we will see. So I think that I think that for us, if this is where you stand, there's a difference between being anti-Netanyahu and being anti-Israel. Or it might be important to look at Israeli polls before you say something. Like, do 90% of Israelis support this? Then maybe is it going to be productive for me to say something? Or is that just going to further alienate progressive Judaism within Israel and not actually accomplish much of anything? I know that our support during the judicial reform meant a lot to them, and that was very welcomed. So, yeah. Any other questions or comments? Let's see. I see in the chat.
This is Ken.
Matt wrote. Oh, hi, Ken. Go ahead.
Just on what you were talking about briefly, I think everybody needs to be extremely careful to, excuse me, discern disinformation coming from Hamas to try and divide the Israeli Jews and the Jews worldwide, and things that they say should be discarded and not really considered.
Yeah, what we're talking about, yeah, media manipulation. I'm walking and go get my cell phone charger so that I don't lose you all. So I want to move to my room. So that's Hamas's media manipulation. Like I said, we hear horrific things like that Israel is attacking hospitals. Well, yeah, well, they aren't attacking hospitals, but they are surrounding the hospitals and going inside the hospitals and battling the terrorists who have made that their headquarters. We hear that Israel was kidnapping bodies out of the hospital. It sounds horrible. And then you find out Israel recovered 2 bodies of hostages from we hear that, but then we find out that, yeah, Israel did take 2 bodies, the 2 bodies of hostages that were found at the hospital. And so there is a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of partial truths. I think too, what's surprising to me, that the media is not focused on at all, is that would look really bad for Israel, is that in the West Bank, since this war began, the settlers have been increasing their attacks on Palestinians, and the media hasn't really covered that much, I feel like, in the West. But I mean, like I said, look at watch Eretz Nederet's sketch on the BBC, and they did a whole fake interview with them between BBC and Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, and it's sad and funny and infuriating, because they would be saying stuff like Yahya Sinwar would be telling the BBC person, like, "Oh, can you please speak louder? I can't hear you over this Israeli baby that I have in my office that's been crying, and gosh, I haven't gotten any sleep. This baby has been crying here for the past month." And the BBC reporter saying, "It sounds like that BBC that Israeli baby is subjecting you to sleep deprivation. That's a form of torture. It sounds like that Israeli baby is torturing you." And he goes, "Exactly." And that's what we're seeing again with the media manipulation, which is and what we're seeing on college campuses, which is this narrative that Israel is a bunch of white people oppressing brown people. And I mentioned that Matthew might have just shared it, so it's worth checking out. So it's and what people don't talk about too is that there are Arabs staying in my hotel who have been displaced from this war. Israeli Arabs who had to leave their homes because of rockets. Hamas killed a woman in a hijab on October 7th who was driving her car through southern Israel, and they shot her and killed her, and they killed many other Muslims, Israeli Arab Muslims. And I mentioned that on my first night here, there was a siren in Tel Aviv. However, I was in a different area of Tel Aviv, so I didn't have to go to the shelter. But one of the rockets landed, and where did that rocket land? And injured two people. One so critically they probably will die of his injuries. And where did that? I don't know if they were Jews or Arabs or not, but where did that rocket land? It landed in Yaffo, a neighborhood in southern Tel Aviv that is historically Arab and today is about half Arab, half Jewish. And so, the that stuff that people aren't considering is how Hamas is also attacking Israeli Arabs too. Matt Davidson rather wrote in here, is the primary expectation that the government release all Palestinian prisoners in exchange for the hostages. What else can the government do to bring home the hostages besides rescuing them by the army, which is challenging at best? Those are the questions being asked. I don't know. What really surprised me is I heard that at the beginning of the war, Yahya Sinwar said, our demand is all the Palestinian prisoners for all the hostages. And there's 6,000 Palestinians in Israeli jails. And I was like, are you out of your mind? By the way, Yahya Sinwar himself was in 1988 he killed two Muslims and two Jews in a terrorist attack, and was sentenced to life in prison, but was freed. Um, was freed in the Gilad Shalit deal, where Gilad Shalit was freed after over 5 years in captivity in 2011, I want to say, and in exchange, about 1,100 Palestinian terrorists, including Yahya Sinwar, were freed as well. So I thought there was no way Israel would agree to this, and surprisingly, the Israelis I've talked to have said, "Fine, do it." Like I mean, that's not the view of every Israeli, but the ones I've talked to have said, "Please go ahead and do it." We have an obligation as a country to make sure that every person who lives here is safe, and it is our obligation to bring those folks home. That is our top priority over everything else. And uh, you know, if we have to release 6,000 Palestinians, it's worth it to get our people home and to get these children home. And so we should do that. And we'll track down the ones we need to, and we'll kill them. And um, yeah, but they're going to. Um, but what happened? And when you tell them, well, but like Yahya Sinwar was released in that deal, didn't this happen because of that Gilad Shalit deal? They'll say, no, this happened because we failed in our intelligence, and our army failed us, and our government failed us. Not like that. That's why this happened. So I still don't know how I feel about that. I feel, but again, I come to it with a very American perspective that we don't negotiate with terrorists, and that if you do this, all it does is encourage more kidnappings. But um, uh, then again, it's not my kids who are currently being held captive, because it's really easy for me to say no when it's not my kids. But I'm sure any of us would agree in a heartbeat to whatever demands if it was our kids being held captive by Hamas. So, yeah, we don't know how many of these hostages are still alive or whatever. Like I said, multiple ones we've found out are dead. Um, or like, with the 19-year-old soldier that whose body was recovered 2 days ago and was buried yesterday. Hamas made a video 3 weeks of her alive, 3 weeks ago, for her still alive, and she died. So I mean, I don't know how she died. If she was killed in an Israeli airstrike, if she was executed by Hamas, if I have no clue, or if it was something else, who knows? Um, so yeah, I'll see. But yeah. Any other questions or comments? Love to hear how you all are doing too, by the way, in the U.S. with growing anti-Semitism.
One of the biggest concerns are all the videos I'm seeing of college students, a Jewish college student at Columbia or graduated from Columbia, others from NYU, and just talking about all the anti-Semitism that's taking place on campuses. It's really awful.
Yeah.
It's disheartening.
Yeah, no, one of our congregants whose kid goes to one of those East Coast universities, a very good school. She told me that her kid was taking Hebrew classes as a foreign language. It was one of his college foreign language classes, and um, one day during the war, they were the class was meeting in the library, and they had to lock the doors of the library because basically there was a mob of students pounding on the door trying to get in to harass or attack or whatever for this class, because it was a Hebrew class. and that's appalling. Like, it's a Hebrew class. I mean, imagine if after 9/11 we were attacking people learning Arab who were studying Arabic in college or something. Like, that would be unconscionable. Um, and I've had a lot of, by the way, really intense conversations with interfaith colleagues whose responses to some of this stuff have been anti-Semitic and don't realize it. Um, it's a big problem, and a lot of a lot of Jewish alumni are hitting these universities now. I think it was Columbia or somewhere. 1,600 Jewish alumni said, "We're going to pull our donations to the university."
That was Harvard.
Harvard. Okay. Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah, this is a massive failure on the part of the college communities to protect and nurture and provide security for all the students that are there. And it's totally intolerable to have that environment continue.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's not safe for college students. I mean, it wasn't safe for me when I went to UC San Diego back in the mid 2000s, late 2000s. And I can't imagine what it's like now. But I faced, by the way, I loved UC San Diego, so I'm not trying to disparage it, but, I did, as the founder and creator of the pro-Israel group on campus, I faced a lot of anti-Semitism. Now, the guy who's my roommate here in Israel, who's a rabbi, he has a rough gig. He's the rabbi in the Hamptons. He told us that if we get stuck here, he said, I don't want to call in this favor, but I will if I have to. He said, uh, 8 of my congregants own private jets that can fly transatlantic. And so I can call on them and see if one of them would fly their jet out here to get us out of here if we get stuck here. And I was like, oh, love Salt Lake City, but I don't think I could help in that regard. But anyhow, different lifestyle there. But anyways, he went to Clark University in Boston for undergrad, and he was very, very proud of his university because at the beginning of the war, they made a statement and said, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are unacceptable. Anybody who is committing acts of Islamophobia or anti-Semitism will be disciplined and potentially expelled. And then they explicitly put, and that includes chanting things like "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." That is a genocidal statement against Jews, and it will not be tolerated at our college. So
that was very good.
But what's frustrating, because I've explained that to people that is an anti-Semitic statement, and they've pushed back and said, no, it's not. Or they've told me, that a member of the Unitarian Church in town, again, I don't mind naming them because they've been absolutely terrible when it comes to anti-Semitism. They and they're realizing they have a big problem of trying to fix it. And I don't think, and they're taking some steps in the right direction, but not a lot. But they have a long way to go. I'll put it that way. Was telling me, well, anti-Zionism isn't anti-Semitism. Well, I don't think anti-Semitism is on the rise. Only anti-Zionism is. And I was like, well, you're wrong on a number of levels. But what I explained to this person too is, when you are a part of an oppressed group or a marginalized minority group, you don't get to when you're a part of, the majority privileged group, you don't get to define what racism or homophobia or whatever is to people in that other of the oppressed group. So like for instance, and sometimes I screw up because I I'm I'm a white straight guy. And as a white straight guy, I don't know what it's like to be a woman or a black man uh or uh a gay person or a trans person. And so sometimes I will say something and a woman will tell me, that was sexist what you just said, and or um a black person might tell me, oh, that what you just said was actually a microaggression and was racist. Or a gay person might say um that was homophobic. And that's never my intention to be any of those things. I never want to be any of those things. But instead of me arguing with them and saying, no, it wasn't, that wasn't racism, to a black person, and explaining to them what racism is, or telling a gay person that wasn't homophobic, you're wrong. Um, I need to be quiet and listen and say, I did not intend that. That was not my intention. Would never want to do that. Can you please educate me so I don't make that mistake again? And yet, when it comes to anti Semitism, it seems, and conflating criticism and criticizing Israel in a way that becomes anti Semitic, people seem to, I don't know, goy-splain to us what it is. So yeah, let's see. So good resource there. What is Zionism? The Unitarian Church leader sure is quick to tell us what is anti-Semitic. Uh, yeah, yeah, it's been an issue there. And I'll tell you, by the way, uh, that that uh, I'll tell you, by the way, that let me see here. Uh, that I reached out to the Utah Muslim Civic League today. The two heads of it are wonderful friends of mine, very dear friends of mine. Um, one of them is one of my best friends, and I said, I've been considering this for the past month, whether to say anything or not, because you all are such good friends. But I feel like as friends, I should tell you how I feel. And they, as an organization, they condemned what Hamas did on October 7th. And I so appreciate that, because that was the right thing to do. And it took courage to do that. And I don't know of many Muslim organizations that did do that. However, one, they waited 2 weeks. They issued their statement on October 21st. And at that point, the war was in full swing. And so they made some sort of comment about how this did not happen in a vacuum. And it's impossible for us to talk about this without talking about Israeli occupation, because they had waited so long that they kind of forced themselves to have to also talk about Israeli brutality. And I was like, I gave them one example, which, because I love and care about you all, I won't mention exactly what happened. But I said, here's an example of what Hamas did to a baby, on and to the baby's mother on October 7th. And when you basically say this was horrible, but it's qualifying it and blaming the victim, and that's not okay. And that hurt my feelings that you qualified it. And I remember in 2014, 3 Israeli teenagers were kidnapped and murdered by, I think it was Palestinian Islamic Jihad members, if I recall correctly. And a few days later, and I don't remember any of those Israeli boys' names, unfortunately. I met their parents, but I don't remember their names. Um, I do remember, though, a few days later, there was a boy Palestinian boy, 13-year-old Palestinian boy named Muhammad Abu Haider, who was kidnapped by 3 Israelis and then burned alive. And every Jewish organization that I can think of issued a statement the same day, unequivocally condemning what happened to Muhammad Abu Haider, and many synagogues put him on their shloshim list. And I don't remember any synagogues or Jewish organizations saying, but this wouldn't have happened had the Palestinians not 3 days earlier. You know, you don't qualify that stuff. You just condemn it. And so a book to read out there is Dara Horn's People Love Dead Jews. That's the name of the book. It's about how basically people love Jews and care about Jews when they're the victims. But then when they are not victims, like the 2 most popular Jews of all time were Jesus Christ and Anne Frank. But living Jews are oppressors. Any other comments, thoughts, or things people want to share?
You said you were wanting to know how things are going over here. There is definitely a problem on like being on a campus, I can say. There is definitely a problem on campuses with, in terms of even just feeling safe to say whether you support any given aspect of what's going on or not, simply because of who the loud non-Jewish voices are, at least on our campus, who are choosing the side that they're choosing. And I'm watching fellow students from, who are Jewish or who are from Jewish backgrounds, but not themselves Jewish, or like just the whole mix. I'm seeing people getting into fights within their own communities because they're fighting over who they can or cannot say that they're willing to put up with on campus because of who's voicing what opinion. Like the main people visibly showing support for Israel and Israeli soldiers are the hard right-wingers who, let's be honest, are using us as a prop. And the people who are, and I'm going to be very generous in this first portion of my statement, who are even slightly trying to show compassion for people who are unfairly, because there are some of them, unfairly being victimized in the stuff that's going on in Gaza, are also the ones who are using that as an excuse to say, hey, genocide. And, it's those hard left-wingers, and there just isn't space in between. And so you're caught between the people who really only care about us if we're a voting bloc and the people who put out editorials in the school newspaper saying it is impossible to be pro-Israel right now, but also it's not anti-Jewish to do so. And also we need to worry about Islamophobia, but we're not even going to mention that anti-Semitism exists. It's feeling caught in between these things and not feeling like we have the ability to speak up for ourselves because people are fighting. It's like we're stuck in an ideological proxy war on campus, and we are the battleground and also the enemy. And that's just so much fun. But I'm watching people trying to figure out how we're going to navigate this, both because we're worried about our own communities and we're worried about how anything we do is going to impact literally everybody else. Because especially in times like right now, as I know, there's no such thing as one Jewish person. We are all monoliths, and it's just, we don't know what to do. And I don't know that there are any answers, but that's kind of
no. I mean, support each other, but it's sad. We're finding folks who are allies we thought were allies aren't allies. Uh, what one of my colleagues who's on this trip is not a pulpit rabbi. She's a rabbi who works with the Religious Action Center of Ohio specifically. She runs like the Ohio branch, and this is a social justice movement, the reform movement, and um, a big victory she just had in her work was that she was very, very involved in the bill that uh, um, Ohioans just passed to keep abortion legal in the state of Ohio, and so she was very involved in that, and that was like her big issue for months and months and months that she worked on. And there was another liberal organization there that was like the abortion rights fund or campaign or something like that for Ohio. That was one of her partner organizations. And then um, immediately after October 7th, they issued a statement about how they, and again, what does this have to do with abortion at all? I don't know. And it's like when Black Lives Matter is supposed to be combating um uh police brutality and inequalities in the justice system in America to Black people and people of color, and these organizations are issuing horrifically anti-Semitic statements um, uh, that are anti-Israel too. Um, it's hard and it's scary, and like I said, Israel is the one country you can be in and be liberal and not be apologetic for being a Zionist.
But like I
Tess, you
shared,
about to say something?
I was just going to say, like I shared with you, Rabbi Sam, it's not just the college campuses. I'm in a URJ class online,
Yeah.
and we were basically told to shut up. The rabbi who was assigned to our to teach our class October 7th had family in Israel. We have a couple of other people in the class who also have family in Israel, and there was an incredibly virulent class member who still happens to be in the class, um, who was, you know, basically screaming sound bites at the class. Israel is at fault, and at the same time, she's all about wanting to convert because being a Jew makes her feel emotionally safe. But she's virulently not just anti-Zionist, she's clearly anti-Semitic. And I don't understand the mentality of even a pretense, even if it's a pretense, a pretense of clinging to us, clinging to our people, while at the same time just like trying to attack us. There are other people in class. We started with 47 people. We were at 17, 18 including the new instructor last week. And the feedback that I got when I raised my concerns pretty vocally, head of the manager of the training told me, well, anti-Zionism is more widespread than you think in the URJ, and we can't, we can't, we can't deny anyone their opinion. My pushback was it wasn't the anti-Zionism that was the issue; it was the anti-Semitism. And we're told not to talk about it in class anymore. And I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't solve it. So it's happening not just on college campuses. This is literally us internally.
Yeah,
This
no,
is who
which is
want to
why I'm
convert.
here.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly who I was talking about. And I personally would never sit on a Beit Din for an anti-Zionist or bring them to our up for a Beit Din, and I would not if I was on a Beit Din and somebody said they were an anti-Zionist. I wouldn't pass them. So, wow, thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Franklin. Rabbi Josh Franklin hooked me up with a sparkling water. What a mensch. Uh, is it from the Hamptons?
It is from the Ampon.
Oh, okay. I told my community here that you've got some private jets to get me out of here in case we get
Just
stuck.
in case.
Well, my congregants are ready to cross country ski over here or come in their Subarus to help us if need be.
Be good.
Tell him Todah Rabbah for bringing you back safe.
Toda Rabba. Rabbi. So yeah, anyhow, yeah, it's a interesting thing. I think that, I've talked to a few rabbis about this test, and I feel like with young people today, there's a lot of folks who um are I think it's very trendy today to be a part of a marginalized minority group. And like the worst thing you can be is a boring white person. And so I've seen people, and I'm not saying this all folks because there are people in our community who very much are part of the trans community, are non-binary, and I've met teenagers who will, for a short time period, claim to be trans or claim to be non-binary, and then 6 months later they're not, and it then told me, oh well, I wanted to have something unique about me, um and likewise, yeah, and I typically am able to weed these people out because the conversion process is a lengthy process. You get people who really get excited about being Jewish because I think being Jewish is part of being a marginalized group, especially right now, in a minority and something unique that sets them apart. And it, Judaism might not actually be for them. And then with some of those folks too, I think they're one, like, how can I even be more unique? I can be a Jew against Israel, um, uh, or they want to have a self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, I've been rejected in every other space, and so I'm going to be as anti-Zionist as I can while converting to Judaism, and that way the Jews will reject me, and it will just show that once again I'm marginalized and rejected. But yeah, if you're, I don't think in today's world there's any place. I mean, I had somebody who did ask me, "Can I become a member of your synagogue?" And even though I'm an anti-Zionist, and I said, "Yeah, you can. But I want you to know that I'm a very Zionist rabbi, and you're probably not going to like a lot of the things I say." Now, there's a lot of folks. I was a pretty anti-Trump rabbi. I'm not anti-Republican, but I'm anti-Trump. I was a pretty anti-Trump rabbi, and there were people out there who left our synagogue because of that. And there were folks out there who said, I think the rabbi's an idiot when it comes to his opinions on Donald Trump. He should probably just keep his mouth shut. But you know what? He gives great pastoral care or great adult education classes. And I like him. I just think he's an idiot on this topic, but I'll still tolerate him. I said, you can kind of decide if that's for you. I told her, though, that uh, for me as the rabbi, we are not going to do any programs at the synagogue as long as I'm a rabbi that are extremist, and that anti-Zionism and BDS is a form of extremism, and also us raising money to build settlements outside of Hebron and stuff like that. That would be extremist, and I wouldn't be doing that either. So I'm not going to promote extremism. Now, that said, if you are an extremist, you are welcome to be a member of our synagogue. You just might not have a very good time, and I'm not going to tolerate you doing hate speech here. But you're still welcome to come if you can behave yourself. And you're entitled to your opinions. I mean, if I kicked out every congregant who had an opinion I found appalling, we'd have no congregants left. So it's the world we live in today. I actually happen to really like this person. I just completely disagree with her on Zionism, and I think she's completely wrong on that, and she thinks I'm completely wrong. So we'll see. Any other thoughts, comments, or anything before I bid you all a Lila Tov and Shavua Tov, and for you in Utah, Shabbat Shalom. Tomorrow I'm being asked what is on my agenda for tomorrow. So tomorrow I am going to Jerusalem. We are going to be let me see here. They keep talking about some app that has our itinerary. Nobody told me what this app was, so I don't have the app. So we're going to be, according to the itinerary, we were going to meet with an organization called Early Starters and visit an early childhood safe space for children whose families are misplaced. And this is an Israeli humanitarian organization whose goal is to protect young children in emergency situations in vulnerable communities around the world. We were supposed to have lunch with American rabbinical students at Hebrew Union College who've chosen to stay for their year in Israel. We're now no longer doing that because for some reason, I don't know why, they don't have class tomorrow, because Sunday usually is a school day here. So we're not doing that, but they're welcome to join us for stuff. So we're meeting with a couple other organizations while we're tomorrow, and then we're going to go to the Hartman Institute, which is a really interesting institute that in Jerusalem, where a lot of rabbis actually go and study. They have a rabbinic program that goes for 2 weeks every summer, and I'd love to do it someday. And you just do text study there and discussion with some of the leading Jewish thinkers in the world. And so we're going to do a text study on ethics and war by looking at with Professor Moshe Halbertal, who was a contributor to the IDF Code of Ethics. And then we're going to hear a response to recent events and have a dialogue with Yossi Kleinhall Levy, who is a journalist, a writer, and just absolutely brilliant. Every time I get to learn with him, I love it. He wrote a book called that I really recommend called Letters to My Palestinian Neighbors. Josh, who's that? Which organization is it that we're meeting with tomorrow? Oh, he's got his earpods in. He can't hear me. My roommate's standing 3 feet away from me and is completely oblivious that I'm talking to him. Let me see if I can get his attention. There we go. Those work well. Anyways, what organization is that we're meeting with first tomorrow? Do you remember?
I haven't looked at the schedule.
Okay, it was something new that got added, so I'll let you know. But yeah, tomorrow will be the first and only day that we're in Jerusalem, but we're coming, which is actually very safe. If you don't go to the old city and places like that, they've had some incidences in the old city, but outside of that, nothing really in the city of Jerusalem proper, and they've done very few rockets. But then we'll be coming back to Tel Aviv in the evening for so yeah. Anything else, or I'll let you all go.
We did mention the.
Yeah, go ahead, Ari.
Okay, so I sounded like I was interrupting somebody else.
No.
We did mention earlier the strangeness with certain people, converts and potential converts, and their attitudes towards things right now. That is one bittersweet thing that I can report that I'm watching happen. I don't seek them out, I swear, but I happen to have run into this semester a handful of people who are like looking at converting, considering it, have been looking into it for a while, or just started on it, but were like feeling hesitant about getting involved in community and stuff because it didn't feel like they were at a point where they could belong. Of those, the ones who are already part of marginalized groups, anytime any of the problems that are going on right now, the first person plurals instantly come into their vocabulary. Like they don't even think about it. The moment that this community they're thinking about, when they previously were like, I'm not certain if I really feel like I can join in with like going to events and stuff, the moment that things are talked about where they're hearing about Jewish communities under attack, they're like, well, what are we doing? How are we doing this? How are we addressing this? And it's like instantaneously they feel that solidarity. And I'm noticing a couple of people noticing this in themselves and realizing what that means for them and how they actually feel about this community they thought they were scared of joining. And so it's like, it's horrible that these kind of events can sometimes bring that out in people, but it's also, like I said, it's a kind of a odd mixture of thing, but there are people who are being driven by this to be more supportive, to be more involved, and that is also happening on campus. It's not just division. There's also people who are getting this growing sense of unity, and they want to do more to help, and they want to be more involved, and it's all sides taking place.
Yeah. No, for sure. And people are getting more involved. Uh, so people are definitely getting more involved. We're seeing people join the synagogue, people coming to Shabbat services who haven't in a long time. We had a woman who said, "I've decided after 30 years that I want of being married to a Jew that I want to convert to Judaism." Yeah, and that's why we're here. Let me see. I'll ask Rabbi Franklin. Rabbi, why did you choose to go on this trip? Can I put you on the spot?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for sharing Sam with us, by the way. Really grateful. I've been telling a story as to why I joined this trip. And that is, and you probably heard this story or a variation of this parable. It's normally used to teach about empathy. And that is, there is an Israeli who's stuck in a pit, and there is a priest who walks by, and the Israeli calls out and says, help me, I'm stuck in the pit. And the priest writes down a prayer and throws it into the hole. A doctor walks by, and the Israeli calls out and says, help me, I'm stuck in the pit. And the doctor throws down some medication into the pit. Then the American Jew walks by, and he hears the Israeli calling out, help me, help me. He jumps down into the pit. And the traditional ending to this parable is that the person in the pit would say something along the lines of, why would you jump in the pit? Now we're both stuck in here. And the man would respond, yes, but I know the way out. That's not the ending to this story. The ending to this story, or the unique version, is the American Jew jumps in the pit. The Israeli says, why'd you jump down here with us? Which is the question we've been asked ever since we got here. And the response that I've been given is, we definitely don't know the way out, but we join you in your pain. And that's why we're here with you, to simply join you in your pain, because that's what it means to be a Jew, to be with you. And I can't think of any reason why I wouldn't be here right now, because this is exactly where rabbis need to be. And I hope you are very proud of your rabbi, because he deserves all the kavod, all the honor for doing what he's doing, and every single rabbi who's here with us. And in case he hasn't told you, there's a sense of abandonment among Israelis right now. Where is everybody? Why aren't people coming? Why aren't people supporting us? Where are all the other rabbis? We thought everyone would be here and flock to us, and they're not coming. We're here. And it takes a special kind of rabbi to be able to come, a rabbi who's really dedicated to Israel and dedicated to the Jewish people. And that should be exactly the type of rabbi that you guys want serving your community. And I hope you're proud of him.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll pay. I'll give you my pay for that a little later. Thank you, my friend. Actually, fun story. It's really fun for me to be here with Rabbi Josh Franklin because he, when I was interviewing for rabbinical school, I went to an open house on the Cincinnati campus, and they thought I was this was back in like 2008, and they put us up in rabbinical students' apartments for the night, and so we could get to know a rabbinical student, ask them questions. And Rabbi Josh over here was the guy whose apartment I was assigned to. So it's fun to be rooming with him again, and see where we both are in our careers. So yeah, I don't have much else to say. I think that you know, my rabbinic colleague here said it really perfectly, which is this is what we do. This is what Jews do: is we come together in solidarity, and it's touching to see. You know, I know not everybody can just get on a plane, come to Israel, or but it's really touching to see that every day people have been tuning in here to come together and talk with me in the middle of the day, and that we've been supporting each other and banding together. And it's a privilege that with the position I have, that me and my colleagues here are able to come and support our Jewish brothers, sisters, friends over here in Israel. So anyhow, with that, I'll let you all go. We got 2 more days of this, and then I'll be returning. They're on a Delta. Well, there are no, the only airlines flying in and out of Israel are El Al, flying up to Amsterdam, then flying home on Delta, or else on one of Rabbi Josh's congregants' private jets. So one of the two. Our jet option kind of sounds nicer. We'll see. All right, everybody. Have a nice rest of your Shabbos.
You too. Stay safe.
Take care.